Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a video. And if this one helps you out, a like genuinely goes a long way for us. Let's get into it. Sugar-free is one of the most powerful phrases in the modern food industry. It is on diet sodas, sugar-free candy, sugar-free cookies, sugar-free yogurt, sugar-free chocolate, sugar-free sports drinks, sugar-free protein bars, and the implied message every time you see it is consistent and clear. Less sugar, fewer calories, better choice. Something you can eat more of or feel less guilty about, or use to manage your weight or your blood sugar while still enjoying something sweet. The reality of what the label actually means, what it requires of the product carrying it, and what food companies use to replace the sweetness that sugar would have provided is significantly more complicated than any of that. And understanding it changes how you read a very large portion of what is sold in grocery stores today. Let's start with the legal definition because this is where it gets immediately interesting. In the United States, sugar-free on a food label means the product contains less than half a gram of sugar per serving. That is the complete regulatory threshold. Less than 0.5 grams of sugar per labeled serving, and a manufacturer can put sugar-free on the front of the package. What the label does not tell you is anything about total calorie content, total carbohydrate content, the type of sweetener or sweeteners used in place of sugar, whether those sweeteners affect blood sugar, or how the product interacts with your metabolism more broadly. Sugar-free is a statement about one specific thing, the amount of sucrose and other sugars in the product, and it says nothing about anything else. There is also a serving size dimension to this that is worth flagging immediately. If a manufacturer defines the serving size of a product as a very small amount, a product that contains meaningful quantities of sugar in real-world consumption portions can still qualify as sugar-free per serving. This is the same serving size manipulation that allows a product with significant caloric content to claim very low calorie counts. The claim is technically accurate for the serving size defined on the label, which may bear no relationship to the amount a person actually eats in one sitting. Now let's get into what they actually replace the sugar with, because this is the heart of the video, and it requires going through several distinct categories of sweetener that the food industry uses, each of which has a meaningfully different profile. The first and most widely known category is artificial sweeteners, synthetic compounds that trigger the sweet taste receptors on your tongue at a fraction of the quantity of sugar, producing intense sweetness with no or minimal caloric contribution. Aspartame is the most studied food additive in history, and the one that generates the most persistent public debate. It is found in Diet Coke, sugar-free gum, thousands of tabletop sweetener packets, and an enormous range of packaged food products. It is approximately 200 times sweeter than sugar by weight, which means you need a tiny fraction of the quantity to achieve the same perceived sweetness. In 2023, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified aspartame as possibly carcinogenic to humans based on limited evidence. This classification, which is the lowest tier of the agency's hazard categories, does not mean aspartame causes cancer. It means the evidence available is insufficient to rule out a potential relationship. The FDA reviewed the same evidence and maintained its position that aspartame is safe at typical consumption levels. The scientific debate around aspartame is ongoing and genuinely unresolved at its edges, though the consensus position of major regulatory bodies remains that consumption within normal ranges is not a demonstrated health risk. Sucralose, sold under the brand name Splenda, is approximately 600 times sweeter than sugar and is made from sugar itself through a chemical process that substitutes chlorine atoms into the molecular structure, rendering it unrecognizable to the body's metabolic pathways and producing essentially no caloric yield. It is one of the most widely used sweeteners in the food supply and is found in an enormous range of products from beverages to baked goods. More recent research has raised questions about potential effects on gut microbiome composition at high consumption levels, and a 2023 study found that sucralose 6-acetate, a compound produced during digestion of sucralose, showed concerning properties in laboratory cell studies. Regulatory agencies have not updated their safety assessments based on this research, and sucralose remains widely approved. But the emerging science around its long-term effects is an active area of investigation. Saccharin is the oldest artificial sweetener still in use, discovered in 1879, and has had one of the most turbulent regulatory histories of any food additive. In the 1970s, studies in rats linked high doses of saccharin to bladder cancer, and the FDA required warning labels on products containing it. By 2000, the mechanism responsible for the effect in rats was found to not be applicable to human biology. The warning labels were removed, and saccharin was returned to the generally recognized as safe category. It is still used in some diet products and tabletop sweeteners, though it has been largely displaced by aspartame and sucralose in most applications. Acesulfame potassium, usually listed on ingredients labels as acesulfame K or ACE-K, is another artificial sweetener that is commonly used in combination with other sweeteners because blending sweeteners often produces a more sugar-like taste profile than using any single sweetener alone. It is 200 times sweeter than sugar and contributes no calories. It is less individually studied than aspartame or sucralose, which some researchers and consumer advocates consider a gap in the evidence base. The second major category of sugar replacers is sugar alcohols, which have a fundamentally different profile from artificial sweeteners and are responsible for some of the most dramatic and unpleasant surprises associated with sugar-free products. Sugar alcohols are not sugars, and they are not alcohols in the conventional sense. They are a class of carbohydrates that occur naturally in small quantities in some fruits and vegetables, and are also manufactured industrially for use as sweeteners. They are sweet, but less sweet than sugar. They contain calories, typically about half to 2/3 the calories of sugar by weight, and they are only partially absorbed by the small intestine, with the remainder passing to the large intestine where it is fermented by gut bacteria. That last point is the source of the well-documented digestive effects of sugar alcohols. Sorbitol and maltitol in particular are notorious in this regard. They are the sweeteners most commonly found in sugar-free candy and confectionery, and they are the reason those products carry the warning that excessive consumption may have a laxative effect. This warning is real, and the threshold for excessive is lower than most people assume. Consuming 30 to 40 grams of sorbitol, which is achievable in a moderate serving of sugar-free candy, is sufficient to cause significant bloating, gas, cramping, and diarrhea in many people. There are well-documented cases of people consuming sugar-free gummy bears or similar products in relatively modest quantities and experiencing severe gastrointestinal distress. The laxative effect warning on the packaging is not a legal formality. It is a description of what will happen to a meaningful percentage of people who eat the product in normal snacking quantities. Xylitol has a better digestive tolerance profile than sorbitol or maltitol and is genuinely beneficial for dental health. It inhibits the growth of the bacteria primarily responsible for tooth decay and is the reason it is the dominant sweetener in sugar-free gum. It has roughly 60% of the calories of sugar. One significant non-dietary note: xylitol is highly toxic to dogs. Even small quantities can cause dangerous drops in blood sugar and liver failure in dogs. And this is worth knowing if you have pets in your household. Erythritol has become increasingly prominent in recent years in health-oriented and keto-friendly products because it has almost no calories, does not raise blood sugar meaningfully, and has significantly better digestive tolerance than most other sugar alcohols because it is absorbed into the bloodstream before reaching the large intestine rather than passing through to fermentation. In 2023, a study published in a major cardiology journal found an association between high blood levels of erythritol and increased cardiovascular risk. The study generated significant media coverage and public concern. It has also been criticized by researchers for methodological limitations, specifically that it measured erythritol levels in the blood after consumption rather than measuring baseline levels in people who regularly consume erythritol over time, which makes the causality interpretation more complicated than initial coverage suggested. The research is early and the scientific community has not reached consensus, but it is a developing area worth watching. The third category is natural high-intensity sweeteners, which have become increasingly prevalent in products positioned as healthier alternatives to both artificial sweeteners and conventional sugar. Stevia is derived from the leaves of the stevia plant native to South America and is 200 to 300 times sweeter than sugar, with essentially no caloric contribution. It is the sweetener most often marketed in natural and organic product lines as a plant-based alternative to artificial sweeteners. The FDA categorizes it as generally recognized as safe. Some people find stevia has a distinct bitter or licorice-like aftertaste that limits its palatability in certain applications. Monk fruit extract, also called luo hangguo, comes from a small melon grown primarily in China and is somewhere between 100 and 250 times sweeter than sugar. It has no calories and produces no glycemic response, and is increasingly appearing in health-oriented food and beverage products. It is generally considered to have a cleaner taste profile than stevia stevia with less aftertaste. Allulose is one of the newer sweeteners gaining traction in the market and has an interesting profile. It is a rare sugar found in very small quantities in certain fruits, including figs and raisins. It tastes and behaves chemically much like regular sugar. It browns when cooked, it has the same mouthfeel, it does not have the aftertaste issues of stevia, but the human body does not metabolize it the same way, resulting in roughly 1/10 the calories of regular sugar and minimal effect on blood glucose. It is increasingly being used in products that are trying to achieve a sugar-like experience without the metabolic effects of sugar. Now, there are two broader points about sugar-free products that go beyond the individual sweeteners and are relevant to how these products actually affect the people who eat them. The first is the question of whether sugar-free products actually help people consume fewer calories over time. The research on this is genuinely mixed, and the picture it paints is not entirely comfortable for the sugar-free industry. Multiple studies have found that people who switch to artificially sweetened beverages and foods do not consistently lose weight as a result, and in some studies, gain weight relative to control groups. Several mechanisms have been proposed to explain this. One is the compensation effect, the psychological tendency to allow yourself more food elsewhere because you made a low-calorie choice at one point. Another is the possibility that sweet taste without caloric content disrupts the body's normal appetite signaling, increasing hunger and cravings for sweet and high-calorie foods. A third is the gut microbiome effects of certain sweeteners potentially affecting metabolic processes. None of these mechanisms is definitively proven as the primary driver, but the aggregate picture from research is that the real-world weight management benefit of switching to sugar-free products is far less consistent than the marketing implies. The second point is critical for anyone managing blood sugar, whether because of diabetes, pre-diabetes, or general metabolic health awareness. Sugar-free does not mean it will not affect your blood sugar. Sugar alcohols raise blood sugar to varying degrees depending on the specific compound. Products labeled sugar-free can still contain significant quantities of refined carbohydrates from flour and other starch ingredients that convert to glucose during digestion. Diabetics and anyone managing glycemic response needs to look at total carbohydrate content and the glycemic profile of the specific sweeteners in a product rather than relying on the sugar-free claim as meaningful guidance. The practical conclusion from all of this is the same one that applies to natural and to most front-of-package claims. The label tells you one specific thing about one specific parameter and implies a great deal more than it actually delivers. Sugar-free means less than half a gram of sugar per serving. It does not mean fewer calories. It does not mean better for you. It does not mean no effect on blood sugar. It does not mean the sweetener used is without any question or debate. And in the case of certain sugar alcohols, it does not mean you can eat a normal portion without spending an uncomfortable afternoon dealing with the consequences. Reading the ingredients list to identify which sweetener or sweeteners are present, checking the full nutrition label for total calories and total carbohydrates, and understanding what those sweeteners actually are and how your body responds to them gives you far more useful information than the two-word claim on the front of the package. Drop a comment if there is a specific sugar-free product you have questions about. We read every single one, and a follow-up video on specific product categories is something we would genuinely enjoy making. And if you want us to do the same breakdown for low fat, which has its own fascinating and troubling history, let us know below. Hit the like button if this was useful, subscribe and tap the bell if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.